Muscat is a variety that we know from many places in the world actually, but in Czech Republic they were actually so ambitious not only just to take like a Muscat variety that we find anywhere else or like a clone of it, but they were so ambitious to breed their own. And first thing I want to show you actually is here like a Czech wine that I got from Moravia when I was recently on a trip there, and this like little Czech flag here on top that you see on the bottle actually. This has unfortunately nothing to do with the quality of the wine. You might know this from Austria where we have the Austrian flag on top of the capsule, which is like a quality indication, but here it's simply like a little marketing tool. The Moravian Muscat didn't actually exist before the 1980s, so it was like a breeding project like in the region of Moravia. Actually, like the second wine that we are tasting today is actually from the region where this grape variety was crossed from Muscat Ottonel and Prachttraube. Prachttraube is a very, very strange little variety that is coming from a heritage of like difficult stuff that is basically not existing anymore. Among others, there's like a Greek variety included in the genetic heritage that is not cultivated anymore in the world. So, but maybe first a little bit about the regions that we're talking about here. We are in Czech Republic. That might be a wine country that is not familiar to everybody dealing with wine, but Czech Republic is actually a very interesting wine country. This tiny little country like in the, we want to call it Central Europe, also because of the communist heritage they often are, let's say, subscribe to the label Eastern Europe, but technically I think most people from a wine perspective will call it Central European. And Czech Republic is a very interesting wine country because they have a very long-standing history of winemaking. Definitely we had some first evidence there already like around the year 200 before Christ, when the Romans already were like cultivating wine around the Pálava hills. We are linking like in the end like an interview to the Sonberk winery where we have been tasting wonderful Pálava wines with them. And then of course in the medieval times, like because of the monks etc., there was also like widespread cultivation. So the story of like Czech winemaking is equally like intense and long as for like most other traditional European countries. But here we have some the big split like after Second World War, when Czech Republic, Poland, many other of the so-called like East Bloc countries turned communist and were part of the Soviet regime. And this of course lasted until 1989, until the fall of the Berlin Wall. And this had severe implications for like the quality of grapes that were produced. So we really have to see it like Czech Republic today as a very, let's say, modern wine country, a very young, vibrant wine community, but also like because of this like about 50 years of communism, there was really like a clear cut where, let's say, a lot of knowledge was lost, a lot of connections was lost, and a lot of like quality focus has been lost. So, however, we have to see today Czech Republic as a wine country with about 18,000 hectares, which is a decent amount, and we only have two wine growing regions. There is one wine growing region called Bohemia, which is a little bit north of Prague, the capital, and then we have the southeast, like facing the Austrian and the Slovakian border, which is called the region of Moravia. And in the region of Moravia, we have roughly 95% of Czech wine production, so you really can see the wine production is split very unevenly between Bohemia 5% and Moravia 95%. In total, we can say that about 75% of Czech wine production is white wine today. However, this fairly like northern country from a latitude perspective, fairly cold influence normally, very continental influence, especially in Moravia, is getting more and more popular and has better climate conditions also for growing outstanding red wines. We will also like link in the show notes an interview to a fantastic Frankovka Blaufränkisch producer Jan Stávek, who is also located in Moravia, that I met actually like recently last week when I was traveling there. So climate-wise, very interesting. Moravia has been really like eye-opening for me. I mean, it is hot. It has been like 30 plus degrees like during the days, definitely. So we feel like in the summer the temperature is extremely aggressive. Nonetheless, big difference to, for example, Hungary, where I'm right now, where the nights are hot too. In Moravia, the temperature usually like cools down at night in June, July, also like to below 20 degrees Celsius or around 20 degrees Celsius, allowing really to have this like differences in day and night contrasts and thereby keeping the acidity in the wines. And so this is hopefully something also that we will like experience in a second when we are tasting the two different Muscat Moravias. So Moravia is split into four like different sub-regions. I have to read them up. I'm sorry, with all the Czech, I'm not really like so comfortable. But Mikulovská is the first, and we have Slovička, then we have Slovačka, and then we have Znojemska. And we will taste like 2 wines from 2 different subregions in a second to give you like a wider perspective of how this like amazing variety actually comes out in the glass. Good, but maybe enough about the grape variety itself. Let's start tasting a wine by Sonberk winery. As I said, I just visited them recently and had a great interview recorded with the marketing manager Christina Eibel, where we talked about the Pálava grapes that they are internationally renowned for. Among others, they won like the Decanter Award for the world's best aromatic dry white wine with that. But now we have the Muškát moravský 2025 here, and it is allegedly like a bone dry style of this grape variety, so I'm not expecting any residual sugar in contrast to the second wine that we are going to taste. But let's have a look. So we are in the Mikulovská subregion, close to the Pálava hill from the estate. Beautiful like architectural design of the estate. You can see actually like the Pálava hills. That is like the name giver of the Pálava grape variety. And they have today about 40 to 45 hectares. They have a little bit of like an integrated approach, work like with organic principles, but also they are not shying away from like, for example, machine harvest in these days, because it's more and more like difficult to get labor, especially for the more like simple wines of the baseline. So very economic approach to winemaking and a very high quality approach. Less salts, we are at 230 meters of elevation. And now let's see what this like Muscat Moravia actually is like telling us. I mean, in the nose, it is very typical for what we would expect like a Muscat to be. It's aromatic, it's powerful, it's peachy, it's nectarine. There's this like kind of honeysuckle perspective, some like lemon, some cantaloupe perspective. Very clean, very straightforward, but also very interestingly, it has a clear like greenish touch. Like I want to say nearly like an underripe touch. And that is really what it is about when we come to Moravia, when we come to Czech Republic or these like more cooler climates. That is one of the reasons why in 1980 this like grape variety was bred, because the classic Muscat variety simply had problems of getting totally ripe in this like fairly harsh climate, especially like in the 80s. It was still like much colder than it is today. So we have a grape variety that is not as powerful as the typical like Muscats that we might know from Asti, or that we might know from Portugal, or the Muscatella from Austria and Germany. It's a little bit more like on the decent, subtle side and fresh and acidic side. Also, we can see this clearly on the palate. I mean, what I just said about the like, day and night contrast in Moravia, that we have these cool nights that are really like chilling down and keeping the acidity vibrant and fresh in the wine. This is an acidity bomb. Wow, this is fresh, this is delightful, this is juicy. This is also like fairly simple, very drinkable, very approachable, not very complicated in that regard. That makes it actually like a beautiful example what this grape variety actually can do when it's taken seriously by a quality producer. So how much is actually of the Moravian Muscat? We talk roughly around 350 hectares today, out of 18,000 in Czech Republic. That is like not so much. We also have some plantings of the same variety in Slovakia and some other neighboring countries, but in Czech Republic itself, it's about 2% of the Czech like plantation, roughly 350 hectares. So fairly important grape variety for Czech Republic. It is one of the like traditional grape varieties listed in Jancis Robinson's like grape wines books that she like co-edited with like José Volamo and Julia Harding. So it is one of the varieties in Czech Republic that we have to talk about. When we talk about these crossing perspective in the 1980s especially, why were the Czech, and if we look at the list of like Jancis like grape varieties she's recommending in 2012 to taste from the Czech Republic, most of them are breedings, crossings. So why is that? We have to remember socialism was like the Soviet Union and their like connected states and countries. They were of course like opposed to the Western countries, and they wanted always to show that they can do their own, that they have their own, that they establish their own. So therefore like crossing projects were very typically across the countries of the East, and therefore we shouldn't be surprised that especially in Moravia, what has always been the center of Czech winemaking, a lot of like crossers were working to create interesting grape varieties. So naturally it's a little bit like partly the climate perspectives that we say, okay, we had to cross like a Muscat that fits the Czech climate in the 1980s, but also we have to think about it in a little bit of a patriotic way to say, okay, we need something here that shows that the communist states actually can produce their own grape varieties that are marketable, scalable, and produce beautiful wines. So with that being said, we are moving to Zlomek and Vávra, second like Moravian Muscat I want to present to you. I'm totally honest, it's a supermarket wine. It's a, I think, fairly large producer that we find in quality supermarkets, but I tasted like the Aurelius before, which was absolutely beautiful. So I decided to take it into the lineup. And we are in the Slovakia region now, which is like maybe like 1 hour 20 like east of Moravia. So even like further towards the Slovakian border. The estate was founded in 2008. It's like run by 2 families and 4 brothers, so to say. They are a member of the Ecovine Association, not the German one, but the one spelled with K actually. And the interesting here on the bottle is definitely it's a Kabinetní, so cabinet. And this is like very interesting to keep in mind about Czech wine laws. They have a fairly big movement now going also like into the PDO direction, similar as we have it to Germany. But for most of the like, let's say, Central European and Eastern countries, they actually have their wine laws organized like the Germans do. So they are working their wine quality levels based on the sugar levels that we have at harvest. So when we have here the Kabinetní, that is, so to say, exactly what the Germans are calling for cabinet. So we should already expect like a certain ripeness, a certain maturity in the glass. Let's have a look. And the color is already like a little bit deeper, a little bit more intense than what we just had in the example from Sonberk. And we can see this immediately in the nose. This is a little bit more powerful, it's a little bit more fruity. It has like a residual sugar, I think, for 8.9 grams per liter, the text sheet is saying. So we already expect a tiny bit more of like a sweet touch to it. Not sweet, but going to the off-dry direction. This is mature. This is a little bit more creamy. There's something malolactic. There is like it reminds me of apricot yogurt in that regard. Powerful, floral, melon, cantaloupe, tiny bit of acacia honey. Yeah, much more intense, much more dense in its like fruit aromas. And what we also can feel immediately here, the acidity is lower. Absolutely clear. We have like a more like ripeness. It was probably harvested a little bit later, therefore the cabinet designation with like higher sugar in the grapes, probably a tiny bit like a little bit of a warmer microclimate. So this totally explains the style of the wine. I wouldn't describe it as sweet at all. It has like a little bit of a sugary touch to it because of the 9 grams, but with the acidity it still like comes across in the glass at what we would describe as a dry wine. But there is definitely a significant difference to the Sonberk that was like bone dry that we had before. Here it's a bit rounder, it's a bit smoother, it's a little bit like more filling in the mouth, a little bit more body, and thereby giving a little bit more of like a floral and like a deeper fruit expression. So this has been like some 10 minutes about the Moravian Muscat. Of course, like if you would like to follow my journal, like tasting all these like crazy grape varieties, I'm super happy about it. Subscribe, like, and post your questions in the comment. Also, like in the show notes, you find some like links and some references to have some further readings or like meet the producers. And then I want to highly encourage you to visit Moravia at some point of time. I'm also linking some other like interviews I did there and some other like grape variety tasting videos. Czech Republic is an amazing country to travel for wine. Good hospitality, lovely people, lovely food, and some beautiful landscape. So totally like underrated on a global scale. Cheers on Czech wine and Moravian Muscat. See you around.